People said my video about the Chomsky-Epstein connection was character assassination. Yep, you bet your ass it was. I'm actually pretty honored to do that. Let me first remind you two seemingly unrelated events. First is Trump's cut of foreign aid to Africa. So expert articles on top medical journals estimate that 14 million people will die in the next 5 years due to those cuts. 14 million slow death from HIV, malnutrition, cholera, childbirth complications, all that. And the second thing, since Trump took power, he has completely cut off economic aid to Ukraine. So all the remaining weapon sales are not free. They're all paid at the market price. But guess what? Trump is now threatening to cut off that as well. So he's trying to cut off America's own sales revenue for what? Just to get Putin a little bit more land and a better position for future invasions. So, did these two worst possible foreign policy withdrawal cause any outrage among young people? Barely. Where are the humanitarians? Where are all the activists? Let me tell you why. It's not because people aren't sympathetic. It's because they were taught to be cynical about US foreign policy. They were taught by decades of pseudo-social science in the popular culture that the US foreign policy toward other countries was always bad, whatsoever. Everything was about robbery or control, and therefore the most politically correct thing to do is nothing. The less the merrier. Aiding Ukraine was prolonging the war. Aiding Africa was economic imperialism. Every policy was bad. So they're kind of content that Trump is doing nothing. Well, they're mad at Trump for other reasons, but not for his isolationism. The culture of doing nothing is getting so many people killed, but Americans are largely okay with it because it fits the narrative of non-intervention. Who was responsible for that stupid line of thinking? This guy definitely played a role. But not just him, like Jeffrey Sachs and John Mearsheimer, and of course the star journalists like Glenn Greenwald, influencers like Hassan Piker. They all have the same business model, which is pretending to be humanitarians by denouncing every foreign policy out of Washington. And the young folks can't avoid them because the Russian bot accounts manipulated the algorithm and inflated their view counts. 2 years ago, more than 300 renowned scholars wrote a public letter condemning Jeffrey Sachs' Ukraine gaslighting. But did it work? No, because the audience believes algorithm more than academic credentials. If you ask these influencer scholars what their policy would be, or which countries have the best political systems, they're gonna play dumb. They won't tell you shit. Nope. Chomsky has been around for a century. What actionable policy did he ever propose? What specific legislation did he advocate for? He did not. And he couldn't have, because his research was not based on modern empirical methods, which means he wouldn't be able to make causal inference between policies and outcomes. So what's the point? All he did was to make moral argument about everything. This is immoral, that is immoral, this is imperialist, this is exploitative, this is fraudulent, this is inhumane. He had a name for every piece of foreign policy he came across. Okay, so what? They're all bad. Thanks, genius, you cracked the code. Great. Now can you tell me what's good? What policy should be adopted? Just nothingness? Just fucking meditating? Is that what Uncle Sam should do? Whenever I argue that a certain US intervention may have some desirable outcome, you can bet there are always people telling me, whatever the outcome, the intention of the policy was bad. These people are not angels. Oh my God. I'm not even religious. You think I would mistake people as angels? You know what? The restaurants you go to aren't angels either. The grocery stores, not angels. The gyms and movie theaters, no. None of them are angels. They're not trying to serve you, they just want your money. But it doesn't mean they should be closed, should they? Just because someone is not an angel doesn't mean they don't play a necessary role in your life. Why should we be obsessed with policy intentions? Let's say your town has a dirty sheriff and some dirty deputies who always shake people down. These people don't have a shred of good intentions. And now there's a mass shooter at school. Do you call the sheriff or not? NATO is sort of a dirty sheriff. And the world before NATO was sort of a town without a sheriff. And it looked like this. Do you want to live like that? This article in Foreign Affairs say that the past 8 decades have been the longest period without a war between great powers since the Roman Empire. That's actually an understatement of the past conflict. I'm not sure how Europe was doing under the Roman Empire, but there were definitely great power conflicts in other places. You guys heard of the Three Kingdom period in China, right? Those 6 decades of the conflict reduced the Chinese population by at least 50%. Some sources even say 80%. Modern people can't even comprehend that kind of disaster. Of course, those had nothing to do with the Romans, but they happened around the same time. So there was no such thing as a peaceful ancient world. Peace between large powers is an extremely delicate balance that requires constant policy innovations, military deterrences, game theory modeling, etc. If you dismiss the post-war US policy as a total failure just because you see some regional wars here and there, it means you don't understand the default setting of human societies. Your memory is too short to remember what shitstorms our ancestors had to endure. The main reason that the post-war Europe survived and enjoyed fixed national borders, and the main reason that Eastern Europe came back alive, was because of NATO. And the main reason South Korea and Taiwan survived was because of security guarantees similar to NATO. You ask any international security experts who actually conduct peer-reviewed studies, they'll tell you the same thing. Just do a search in Google Scholar and you'll see. You ask any Eastern European countries why they joined NATO, they'll tell you the same thing. And if you ask South Koreans or Taiwanese why they stick with the US even though it's an asshole, they'll tell you the same thing. There's a reason these countries didn't make policies based on Chomsky's books. Their lives were on the line. Somehow Chomsky and his spiritual comrades try to persuade you to get rid of NATO and go back to that world. Maybe because he never bothered to learn game theory and hardcore political science. But most likely, I think it's because moralization is a better way to sell books than strategic analysis. The dude enjoys fame too much, so he chooses the most accessible way to reach the readers. I do that too, I admit. I'm trying to reach as many people as possible. I like fame too. But at least I'm not pretending to know better than actual experts who publish their research through the brutal peer review process. By the way, the double-blind peer review is such an important system because it makes sure that you have to convince people without using your fame. And that's a painstaking process that requires countless all-nighters. And that's why very few modern scholars claim expertise in multiple fields. Okay? They just don't have time to study mountains of data and literatures to the extent of passing peer reviews in different fields. But that doesn't stop old Noam. He appealed directly to readers and skipped the peer review process. In that regard, his playbook is pretty similar to Trump's. Okay, both of them use their rhetorical skills to accumulate a cult following, and those followers will believe whatever they say in any field, not just their own field. Elon Musk actually is also trying the same thing. Of course, verbally he is pretty awkward, but he has the aurora from his bank account. That can also work. Okay, back to the scandal. For the record, I don't think the connection between Chomsky and Epstein is criminal in any way. But that connection proves that what he tells you is not what he believes. He's no less money oriented than the capitalist world he's been piling on. So, communism for thee, capitalist for me. So, he moralizes everyone and everything, but his scrutiny doesn't apply to himself. As this master guru, he's entitled to some little fun birthday parties with Epstein, and you're not allowed to discredit his work based on his personal life. But somehow you have to discredit every past US foreign policy based on the politician's intentions. What the heck? If you watched my videos for a while, you know I rarely spend time commenting on anyone's moral choices. It's not my cup of tea. But I have to do it to Old Noam because that's his favorite tool for political analysis. We have to hold him to the same standard as he holds the others, right? Some people said I was not being fair because Chomsky is too unwell to explain himself. Well, he had a chance to explain himself years ago when he was totally lucid. A Wall Street Journal reporter asked him about the money Epstein managed for him. He could have come clean and explained their relationships. But guess what he said? It's none of your business. If his writing style is based on factual causal inference like normal political science, he doesn't need to be morally exemplary. Look, fact A as measured by this parameter leads to fact B as measured by this parameter. That's fine. You don't need a moral high ground to do that. I don't care who you hang out with. But what he did all day was to pass moral judgment on every goddamn thing. So his credibility must be associated with his own moral choices. Isn't that right?